Hinchcliffe, who's a very abrasive comedian also, and they just start talking about their lives. But Sean Strickland gets on there. He's the brashest, rudest, crassest person ever. And he just starts to talk about childhood trauma and how his dad used to beat the hell out of him, and how his brother used to sit next to his dad with a knife in his waistband, and his brother was thinking about how he was going to stab his dad because he hated him so much. Like real
hard stuff.
intense child. And he just starts to cry, right? And it doesn't make the way that Sean Strickland is abrasive okay. It doesn't make it the right way to be in the world, right? But I guess for some reason, if I understand a person and I understand how they became the way they are, then it's easier for me to palate it. And maybe even I feel like it allowed me, back to that original idea, it allowed me to see through this outcropping of like a way that he deals with the childhood abuse that he went through. And I can see past that, and I get to see the true person. I get to see Sean Strickland. And he actually, like in my appraisal, if you watch him long enough and you pay attention, he's got a lot of integrity. He really has values. He wants to be a good person. How he's going about it is definitely controversial and up for, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and I think some of that, especially with those people who are promoting fights like that, part of it, I wonder how much of it's for show.
Yeah, and that's,
you know what I mean? Like they're
they're
trying to drum up. It's like, I mean, I guess we're gonna start off talking about martial arts. It's like,
yeah,
like you have like Conor McGregor, who's way overboard, right?
Oh,
like,
he jumped the shark a long time ago.
Yeah. But then you have like, you have him, when he fought Khabib, he's talking bad about his religion. He's talking about his father who died.
Yeah.
Like if ever there was a time to be sensitive,
Right.
And so, Khabib doesn't say much, but then he's in the fight and then he's like smashing him and he's like, let's talk now. And then, and then Conor's like, it's all just business.
Right.
Well, it wasn't business to Khabib.
No, Khabib.
Like I saw him on Tyson, and he was like
more genuinely.
Yeah, and he was like, if there was no security guards, like if there was no officials, and we were like, what would have happened? And they're like, well, you would have killed him.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah.
So, anyways, I just wonder like how much of that. I mean, it's coming from somewhere. Right, but then there's like a performance for an audience.
I don't think there's any performance to crying about your childhood trauma.
No, that's where you get into like maybe
out.
Yeah.
Well, and I get a lot of that with Sean. I actually think that he doesn't want to be put in a vulnerable place, and so he's very aggressive, even in the way he interacts with people verbally.
Yeah,
and he pushes the envelope and things like that. But and that is maybe a fun part of, like, to me it's a fun part of mixed martial arts, of trying to separate out the true person from what's just show, and the different ways they approach it. And some people are, well, I'm an entertainer and I'm gonna be this character, and other people go, I'm gonna be me and we're gonna fight, and if I win, then I keep fighting and I keep getting contracts and I get paid more, and I don't have to be fake to do this, right? It's trying to separate that out. But
so like when you're talking about the true self, then like bring it back to that. Like, what are you thinking about with that, as far as?
I just think it's a fascinating thing in a few aspects. Like, how often do people not know that that's not who they are? Sean Strickland, when he won the world, I don't know if you know much about this, but he got a last minute fight against Israel Adesanya, and Israel Adesanya had been the dominant champ for multiple years. And the only reason Sean Strickland got the fight is the guy that Israel Adesanya was supposed to fight had an injury. and they're like, well, they got the card coming, and like people are gonna show up, and there's an event
Yeah,
to
yeah,
put
yeah.
on, and they needed a fighter, so they call Sean. He's There's no way that he would ever be in a title fight by his merits. They just needed someone who would say yes, right?
Right.
And he goes, yeah, I'll say yes. And he goes out there, and in my opinion, he pulled off the biggest upset in UFC history. Like, just hands down, shouldn't have won the fight. And it wasn't a fluke. Sometimes, like, you got like an old fight, like George St. Pierre fought Matt Serra and was dramatically better, but Matt Serra got a lucky punch in and knocked out George St. Pierre. And then they fought again, and GSP beat the brakes off him, right? This was not that.
Yeah.
Sean Strickland was the better fighter. 5 rounds straight, beat him. Biggest upset in UFC history. And afterwards, in his brash kind of way,
Bravado, yeah.
he's going, thanks, Dad. Thanks for being such a piece of shit and beating the hell out of me when I was a kid. Look what it did for me. Look where I'm at, right? And he's being sarcastic. But there is this thing in him that goes like, that made me this. And I think I would challenge that. Maybe at one point it pointed him in that direction. But I think that he would be a great fighter, even if he wasn't abused as a kid. You know what I mean? Or maybe that was a part of his story, but it doesn't have to be a part of it now. Like, he would be a great fighter, even if he could forgive his father and not feel hurt and torn up by it. And like, he would still be who he is. And he doesn't have to be this outcropping of a defense mechanism that responds to the trauma that he went through.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Like, would he be the same person if he didn't have that? Like, if he had a comfortable life,
Yeah.
would he become who he was? Like, obviously this is all hypothetical, so it's like it's impossible to know. But a lot of those people that end up being great come from very terrible situations where
Yeah.
they have to overcome that. And if he's in a space where he hasn't, he might still be like he still might be like relying on that, in order to
Yeah.
fuel himself for like what he's doing. Like there's yeah. No, I think about it. So I follow fighting like loosely,
Yeah.
but I do follow ultra marathon running because I participate. I do ultra marathons.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's interesting in it is like why do people get into it?
Uh-huh.
And a lot of times you get people who get into it because they're trying to work through something, and for whatever reason they instinctually like this is what they go to. Maybe it's like maybe you're running from something and you're physically like like you're running like. But I know a lot of people who, maybe not a lot of people, but I know people that it's like they got into it because they had a drug habit or they had something. Mm-hmm. And so it was they were trying to take from like a negative habit that they had to making it into a more positive one.
Yeah.
And I remember like I listened to like a lot of Rich Roll, and he was interviewing this guy named Ken Rideout, who he's like 50 something, and he's like the world champion, like master marathoner. He runs like a 2:30 marathon. It's like it's crazy.
Yeah.
But so Rich Roll just starts asking him these questions because he comes from this traumatic background, growing up in Boston and stuff, and it's like he starts asking him the questions like are you still like running from that childhood?
Yeah.
Has that been put in its appropriate place? And he's like, honestly, I don't know. And it's like, well, if you don't know, the chances are you don't. Like, you haven't
right.
you haven't moved past it. And he said like, well, I'm scared that if I do move past that, all of my drive and ambition will go away.
That's the part I'm curious about. See, I'm actually because originally when I talked about Sean Strickland, you were like, well, did he have to go through that to become that? My question is actually more present tense. That got him to where he is. Does he still need it? Does he still, right? Like, would
But
he lose his edge if he was at peace and didn't have that trauma haunting him anymore?
no, I mean, that's a hard question. Like, only that he would answer. No, I mean, from what Rich Roll was saying and talking to other people about it is that he's like, I haven't found a single runner that's actually done the work and come to peace with their traumatic background that is worse. He's like,
Right.
if anything, they become better because it frees up space.
That's my hypothesis with Sean Strickland,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is that he doesn't need that anymore. He doesn't need to have the bravado and all this. He would be a great fighter still if he could put that away.
But it's also like his journey, and he's probably not ready for it, like for that. You know, like myself, like I got into ultra running, and I mean, it's a weird thing to be part of because it's like the amount of suffering that you can reach is like pretty crazy. And you saw this because you come out and crewed me when I've done 100-mile races and the absolute like just misery and pain towards the end of it. But I started doing it like just trying to work through my own like trauma of like a toxic like prior like marriage. But it was like something that I felt to do because in my navigating that difficult relationship, like I personally just made myself smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And I had taken a class that was like on trauma and healing, and the teacher had said like he's like trauma is. He's like these are experiences that completely overwhelm like the system, you know, your body. And he's like it's very hard for words to get you out of that. He's like, you know, you're not going to think your way out of it. You didn't think your way into it. He's like, you know, and it happens to like all of you. And he's like, in my experience, he's like, you have to find something that will override that, because ultimately trauma makes people feel small and vulnerable and helpless and all of these things, which I was very in touch with. And so he was saying that like for him, and he grew up like in the Philippines and was like, you know, there's like civil war and crazy stuff happening, right? And he's like, but I always felt like I was garbage. And so he's like, so what I did was, he's like, what I felt that I needed to do was, he's like, I would actually go like hop into dumpsters and gather stuff out of the dumpsters, and I would turn them into these collages. So I was taking garbage and making it something beautiful. And he's like, I did that for like 3 years.
Wow.
And he's like, I gave away every single collage to friends.
Yeah.
And he's like, and then finally, he's like, I did this one last one, and then it was like, I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like he's like, I had transformed my life from feeling like that it was garbage and useless to that it was like that I had worked through that, you know?
Right.
And so like I got into ultra running like because I wanted to do something that it was like, okay, you're not powerless.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and I know that it's still like a process for me. Like it's not something that I've like worked through. Like I wouldn't say I've come to like an authentic, true self, like because of it. Maybe part of it is that I'm, instead of like using the running to try to address it, like maybe I'm still just like running away from my own past.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's hard to tell. But I'm pretty sure that it's not like something like, because I can still feel it like when like I start to have like a somatic response.
Yeah.
To something that triggers it, and then that lets me know like, okay, it's in there.
Something's going on
somewhere. Even though my life is very good now, I have an amazing wife and kids and stuff, but it's still in there. And so I mean, it's very interesting, like in the case of like Sean Strickland, that it's, if he was abused, that then he would turn to fighting.
Yeah.
But it's probably he was drawn to it because he probably felt helpless for whatever reason, especially if there was like siblings involved who were also helpless. If he had a brother that was considering stabbing his dad, I don't know if his mom was involved.
He told us,
and that's where it starts to get really,
that he would sneak into his mom's room because he thought that his dad was going to kill his mom. And that one night he snuck in there and he was hiding under the bed. And he said, it was just a really low socioeconomic, like, he said there was bed bugs and fleas jumping on him under the bed, right? Like it was not a clean, high functioning house.
Yeah, you don't want to stay there.
And he hears his dad start to like choke his mom and start to threaten to kill her. And he comes climbing out from under the bed and smashes a guitar over his dad. Anyway, just yeah, that kind of thing. Like it was, yes, people were threatened.
Yeah, and so like the helplessness, particularly I think like when it's a father and it's abusive to not only the kids but to the mother, like the helplessness that people feel in that.
Yeah.
But it is curious, like it is curious that he would then turn to fighting. Yeah. But it's probably because he's still fighting his dad. It's probably not even fighting any of these people that are in front of him. If he's just won the belt and he's still addressing his dad, you know what I mean? Like that's like some raw, real stuff right there.
Yeah. But it is a fascinating point because I know in my own life, the things that were harder for me, the relationships that were harder, I can work through those in a way that I'm actually really grateful for those experiences over time. Like it's not easy to do immediately. So no experience, at least, I don't know, tell me what you think about this, but no experience in our life is necessarily good or bad. And maybe it's just how we respond to it.
No, I mean, I agree with that. Like I look back and it's like, do I wish like as a 27-year-old that I didn't get married and spend 13 years of my life in a very hard relationship? I mean, on the one hand, there's no point, right? Because I can't go back.
Right.
I made that decision. I made that decision. When I made that decision, did I make the right choice? Like probably not. I can't really say much more than that. But do I look back on it and do I regret my life?
Yeah.
No, I don't regret my life. Do I feel sorry for like young Brett and the situation that he got in that was way more than he could handle? Yes, sure. But there's kind of no point, like it's like your life is what your life is. You either learned from it and gathered some wisdom, or it's just not dealt with yet.
Yeah.
Like that's how I see it. So do I regret it? No, I don't. Like I don't regret it. Do I wish it'd gone otherwise? I don't even engage in that like mental activity.
Yeah.
Because there's not a point. Like I'm like, I don't have a time machine.
Right.
All I have is like right now. And to the degree that it impacts me in my life now, that's what I have to have responsibility for.